There are few things more intense and exciting than a good gambling anime. The thrill of seeing people at their most desperate, risking everything they have, even their entire lives, on a roll of the dice or a hand of mahjong. The psychological battle that ensues when a great gambler tries to defy all the odds with a good bluff or form a strategy to take advantage of an opponent's cheat. At their best, gambling shows can be more nail-biting than the most epic of shonen battle anime. But sadly, we don't have a lot of chances to see them at their best. There are a few amazing psychological thrillers like Akagi and One Outs, but there is just as much garbage like Rio Rainbow Gate, which disguises its lack of substance with giant anime titties. Before the start of the season, Kakegurui looked interesting because it seemed like it could go either way. On the one hand, it's chock full of hot anime girls, but on the other, they're not exactly moe pretty. The characters have a raw, over-sexualized look to their designs that's very reminiscent of Prison School and a lot of hentai. And underneath the screwball comedy, Prison School had a lot of strong psychological elements. So going into the first episode of Kakegurui felt like a coin flip to me. I wasn't sure if I'd be seeing another piece of empty-headed trash or the next great gambling masterpiece. As it turned out, that coin landed on its side. Kakegurui does have some fascinating psychological elements with a cast of attractive and compellingly broken characters along with a twisted, over-the-top sense of humor that's very reminiscent of Prison School. As a fucked-up school comedy, it is immensely entertaining, and I can totally see why it's the most popular show of the current season. But it is not exciting, not even a little bit. In fact, it's one of the most predictable, boring gambling anime that I've ever seen in my entire life. It pretends to be a high-stakes, all-or-nothing thrill ride like current genre kingpin Kaiji, but at the end of the day, it's all nothing but a sham. I'm really torn on this series. On the one hand, it's bringing attention to one of my favorite and most underrepresented subgenres. On the other, it's grossly misrepresenting what that subgenre has to offer. So today, I'd like to take some time out of my busy schedule of going to too many anime conventions and making my parents lie about what I do for a living to discuss what Kakegurui does wrong, in the hopes that I might change the anime industry for the better with my unparalleled wisdom, or at least help some of you understand why you might not be satisfied whenever the show decides to break out the cards. To figure out what makes Kakegurui a bad gambling anime, we first need to figure out what makes a good gambling anime. And while there are a few different factors, there's one thing that you absolutely need: interesting stakes. No, not that kind. I'm talking about the prize and the ante, what the characters stand to win, and what they could potentially lose. You need to get the stakes of a story like this just right in order to properly ratchet up the tension. For a gamble to be really interesting, its outcome needs to be something that can tangibly change the gambler's life, either for the better or for the worse. And it's vitally important that the risk matches the reward. After all, nobody is gonna potentially throw their whole life away for $100. Kaiji author Nobuyuki Fukumoto is a master of this. The series starts with Kaiji risking a life of slavery for a chance to erase his massive debt, and only gets more dire from there. As the series goes on, we're introduced to the villainous Hyodo, a wealthy psychopath who gets his jollies watching people risk their lives for life-changing amounts of money that are basically pocket change to him. Shit gets real fast, but it never gets unreal, and that's important. In a gaming anime, you can't let the stakes of a match get so high that the story would have to end if the protagonist lost, because then the protagonist can't lose, ever. Yugioh is pretty exciting for about 5 minutes until you realize that Yugi will only ever lose if someone like Kaiba blackmails him and he's got a safety net to fall back on. And it only gets worse as future games repeatedly risk the fate of the world on a hand of cards. If your hero always wins, you quickly lose that sense that anything could happen that is so essential to the thrill of gambling. Again, Kaiji is an amazing example of this in action. He does frequently bet his own life, but usually it's in increments, so he might win while losing an ear in the process, or maybe he'll end up 9.5 million yen in debt and get all the fingers on one of his hands chopped off. A good gambling show has to be willing and able to pull that trigger. Kakegurui manages to get this wrong on both fronts. While its high-stakes games do involve massive sums of money changing hands, we never get the sense that the money means all that much to protagonist Yumeko Jabami or almost anyone else in the world. Yumeko is as flippant about throwing away 1 billion yen as she is 10,000 or 100. And while that's an interesting character trait to watch, it doesn't do much to get us invested in whether she'll win or lose. For someone like Kaiji, winning means raising himself out of poverty, while losing means grave injury and spending the rest of his life trying to pay off that debt. For Yumeko, losing means that she'll get bullied a little and one day she'll have to marry a rich guy who the student council president wants to control and who's kind of weird and creepy, but otherwise she's still rich and married and rich. Except not even that. It's later revealed that the 300 million yen, that's about $3 million, that Yumeko loses to the Culture Club is barely a fraction of her actual net worth, a sum that the manga has yet to nail down even 43 chapters in. So no matter how absurd the bets get, there's never a tangible sense of danger to any of them. Yumeko may as well be betting a Beanie Baby collection for all the actual value that she places on the money in the story. If you don't see why it's important for a show like this to have a real sense of risk, think of it this way. It's entertaining and impressive to watch a high wire act at the circus, but it only becomes exciting when they take away the safety net. Even though, if you think about it, you know that this means that they've practiced and checked their equipment to the point that nothing could possibly go wrong, that doesn't matter. Even though it's all a performance, it makes you feel like one mistake could kill somebody. And that feeling ratchets up the tension in the circus tent substantially. That's the magic of a show like Kaiji, something that you can only get from a story that's willing to drop half of its established characters off a building. You know that it won't do that to the protagonist, but then again, it might. Comparatively speaking, Kakegurui feels like watching a kid's gymnastic competition. Performing tricks on a balance beam 3 feet above some thick crash mats might involve all of the same technical skills as a tightrope act, but you need to really stretch your imagination to pretend that they're even remotely the same thing. The underlying issue is the show's setting. Kakegurui's characters are children attending high school, so even if they weren't all rich, they'd still have a massive safety net. They will always have a roof over their heads and food in their bellies, and most of them have parents to take care of them. It's basically impossible to put these characters in the same dire straits as anyone from Kaiji. The series seems to be aware of this problem, so often Yumeko bets more than money, which has the potential to solve it. But these bets either end up being over something intangible, like letting the president or school idol plan out her life for her, or never being able to gamble again, or they end up being nothing more than a ruse. By chapter 43 of the manga, Yumeko has made 3 different bets where the loser will be killed. Of course, she can't lose these because it would be the end of the story, which is a problem in itself, but the bigger problem is that nobody else dies either. Without going into massive spoilers, in every scenario she finds a way to keep everyone safe, or discovers that there's some kind of secret safety feature that was there all along and the danger was only pretend. Well, okay, in one scenario, the safety feature only saves the intended victim by luck, but of course nothing in fiction is actually random at all, and saving a doomed character with a lucky chance that the audience wasn't even aware was a possibility just calls attention to that and feels like a cheap Deus Ex Machina. Even in scenarios where Yumeko stands to lose something painful that wouldn't immediately end the series, like her fingernails, we never actually see anything messed up happen, because in addition to keeping the story going, the author wants to keep the cute girls cute, and thus the show has to be gore-free. The only time anyone loses their fingernails, they do it by choice, and I'm not gonna spoil that. Kaiji, on the other hand, goes through with that and much worse. And again, to avoid spoilers, the first time that the Kakegurui manga briefly threatens to get, well, actually threatening in Volume 7 by supposedly removing a safeguard, we find out that it was all a bluff not one chapter later. As I discussed in my video about how Yui ruins sword art online, you are allowed as a writer to set up deadly scenarios and then let your characters escape by the skin of their teeth. But if that's what happens every time you do that, the audience will catch on to your trick pretty quickly. Kakegurui has been going for over 1,600 pages, so the trick is pretty obvious at this point. Speaking of catching onto tricks, another important aspect of any gambling anime is strategy. Setting up the crazy variant dice game or glass tile mahjong game or high stakes raffle that the characters will play is only half the excitement. After that, you have to figure out how they're gonna cheat. Because with people's lives and livelihoods on the line, of course they're not gonna simply leave everything up to chance. They will do everything they can to put fortune in their favor. At a basic level, that's gonna involve card counting or bluffing and mind games. But where gambling anime get really exciting is when a villain, or sometimes hero, dreams up an insane cheat that boggles the mind. Cheats like these turn simple games of chance into intense battles of wits. One character has a devious strategy that their opponent can't possibly see through, and when the opponent inevitably does, they find a way to turn that cheat against them, but then they have to stop their adversary for figuring out that they know while employing their counter strategy, and sometimes that just puts them into a deeper trap. It's crazy. Diving into the minds of players like Akagi, Kaiji, or legendary gambler Tetsuya and seeing them think through these problems is what makes their respective series so engaging. A single gamble in Kaiji can last half a season, but it remains interesting because of the crazy minutia of the minute-to-minute play. Plowing through one complicated game every episode or two, Kakegurui doesn't really have time for that. And that's a shame because some of the gambles that the show comes up with are genuinely complex and interesting, or at least they could be interesting if there were ever any real danger to the characters. The story presents Yumeko as a bit of an enigma, so we don't actually have many chances to see inside her head at all. We are never privy to her master strategies until she reveals them to her opponent at the end of the gamble. More often than not, we see matches from the perspective of those opponents instead, listening to them cackle inside their heads about their elaborate, unbeatable cheat before Yumeko reveals that she saw through it at the start of the game and was playing them all along. It feels a lot like watching BBC's Sherlock, where we're presented with a clever, seemingly unsolvable mystery and spend the whole episode pondering it, only to watch a pompous jackass pull a solution out of his ass at the last second using information that we were never shown, all in service of making that hero look smart and cool, instead of making the mystery feel satisfying. If you've got a spare hour, H-Bomber Guy made a fantastic and stupidly in-depth video about the problems with Sherlock, which I will link to in the doobly-doo and the end card. He's also got a really great video on Fallout New Vegas and 3 that you should check out. Gearing stories like this towards emphasizing the immense, unfathomable intelligence of the hero can be entertaining in its own right, but it sucks all of the fun out of the actual mechanics of the game or mystery. The audience quickly learns that there's no point in even trying to follow the rules or think about possible strategies, because the super clever hero will come up with something like launching Gaia the Dragon Champion into the castle's float ring using Catapult Turtle that they couldn't possibly have come up with. Literally, because they were never given the information that they would need to do so. No Game No Life also has this problem to an extent, but the games remain exciting because they're so outlandish and well executed in terms of animation. And even if we don't see into Shiro and Sora's thought processes, the show at least gives us all the information that they use to formulate their plans. The Shiritori game with Jabril is wild and chaotic and enjoyable as a piece of random humor, but we see Sora drop that H-bomb at the beginning and remove Jabril's magic circuits, and we see him prime her to say empty-headed academic before the game even starts. He even tells us to watch for something like this in the previous episode when he tells Steph that a game is won before it begins. Likewise, while the end of the Galgun battle feels like a bit more of an ass pull, the show goes out of its way to establish memory manipulation through magic as a tactical option with the Othello game. So using that on Steph feels valid. The only detail of the final plan that we're not actually given is the NPC movement patterns, though I think that they probably talk about those in the light novel and the fact that they don't make noise while they walk. Even if there was no way we could actually put all of that together, giving us the same info as the protagonist makes the show feel fair, which is important if a show wants to keep us engaged in its games. Kakegurui fails at that utterly. which means that the show is left to stand entirely on the strength of its characters, and to its credit, it does a really good job of fleshing them out and making them entertaining, but the actual gambling elements are handled so poorly that they might as well not be there at all. Yumeko and the president could be fighting each other with giant scissors, or martial arts, or engaging in silly jailbreak shenanigans, or facing off in cooking contests for all of the difference it would make to our enjoyment of the show. That's an important point though. The show is still immensely enjoyable and well put together for what it is. What it is just isn't a gambling anime at all. It's a high school comedy with a gambling theme. In a worst case scenario, I worry that it's gonna encourage more weak sauce copycats in the same vein, but I'm hoping that it might get more weebs interested in gambling anime as a whole, and that's why I made this video. If Kakegurui has piqued your interest and you want to see more shows like it, I suggest giving Kaiji a watch. I know it's not a looker and its 52 episode length is hella daunting, but if you watch just a little bit of it, I guarantee that you will find yourself hooked on a nail-biting thrill ride like no other. Well, no other except for Akagi, which comes from the same author and is also incredible. You can watch both Akagi and Kaiji on Crunchyroll. I'll put links in the description, and if you don't have a Crunchyroll Premium membership yet, you can sign up for a 14-day free trial at crunchyroll.com/basement. I'll tell you now, there are a few better uses of that trial period than a Kaiji marathon. And I mean, you're gonna need to kill some time anyway before Kakegurui comes out, since Netflix won't be releasing it for like half a year, and there's no other way you could possibly watch it, right mateys? Picking up a Crunchyroll subscription is a great way of telling the big streaming services that simulcasts are important to you and that they should probably work on implementing them if they want to get your cash. If you want to send a more direct message about that, I will leave a link to Netflix and Amazon's contact pages below. Like Gigix said in his recent video, just telling them that this is a problem will help. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite gambling or gaming anime is, and while you're down there, make the safest bet you'll make all week by hitting subscribe. You could win as many as 2 great videos like this every single week. If you want to hedge that bet, pledge your support to my Patreon, and you'll also get access to my Discord server, as well as copies of my scripts and other cool goodies. Thank you so much to the patrons whose names you're seeing on screen right now for helping out with that. If you want to see more of me right now, then Google has a recommended video tailored specifically to your tastes right up here. Or you can click down here for something that I personally recommend. And you can click my erogenous zone right in the middle of my chest to go to my podcast, the Weekly Weebcast. But if this canned outro is the last you see of me today, then I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.